So you want to make your own comic and you want an overall idea of the whole process. In this video I am going to show you 10 steps to make your own comic. Be aware that many comic artists do not follow this process because after all, the rules are made by you. So you can skip these steps, follow these steps, rearrange these steps, etc. So well, let's just start. My name is MG and let's just start. Number 1, the idea. Even if your story is going to be very complex, most experts recommend that the idea should be simple, mostly recommended to be one sentence long. For example, Luke Skywalker was a guy who has to learn to control the Force and bring balance to the galaxy. Or Romeo and Juliet. Actually, the story is very complex, but most people know it as Romeo and Juliet are two lovers whose love is forbidden by their families. And there you have it, entire plots in just one sentence. Number 2, deciding the drawing style and kind of comic. Think what kind of comic would suit your idea best. Maybe it's like the original old comics, the ones we all love. Comic strips, a manga, a superhero comic, or other kind of comics that I do not know the category of, I don't know. This step becomes easier because you already have the idea of what the comic will look like and how it will serve its purpose. Number 3, traditional or digital. Although usually many people think that it's just an artist's preference, and it may be true, there are also some things to take into account whether you go traditional or digital. For example, how much time will it take? Maybe digital can save you some work. Or the look of your comic, like maybe you want a certain complicated technique of blood, and let's pretend that I do this correctly. To do blood making manga, it's a good idea, for example. How much money will you have for resources? Personally, I use a tablet, a digital tablet, and I know it's very expensive, but it's just a one-time purchase. So for me it is worth it rather than me having to buy little things of that or little things of other that and go to the store and lose time. At the end, it's more expensive for me to go traditional, even though I like it. Realize that a comic takes a long time. You want quality, but you also want speed, unless you want to create one comic page each month, which isn't very good, and I do not think you want that. Number 4, outline your story. This step is hated by many authors, and maybe it will be hated by you, but I like it. What is an outline? It is a perfect way to organize your thoughts. For many creatives, it's about writing down the whole story without detail from the beginning to end. Well, there are people who think that you should include all details that you can, but I do not think that you have to worry as much. Maybe I will make a tutorial on how to do an outline for your comic. Personally, I use some sort of timeline in which I just have what happens in the story, and if it's not interesting or there are plot holes, I can correct that. Number 5, revise. Now revise the story over and over, and that's the good thing that you already have an outline. You may want to ask for feedback from beta readers, which can be people you trust, like your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your family, friends, etc. If the story is not interesting, it's unlikely that the art will be enough to save it. If your comic is only good because of your art, you have higher chances making a sign instead of making a comic. Number 6, character design. You probably already have the characters' personalities. I mean, if you already did your outline or like you have a very good idea, and you already should have your main character. P.S. It's the one the story was built for. So let's think about the characters. Many people, including myself, have made the mistake of creating too many unnecessary characters sometime in the past. Don't get me wrong, you can have lots of characters, just make sure they are interesting and useful to tell the story. Characters are super important. They are the reason your audience may stick with you, even if your plots becomes a little weak in some occasions. Of course, I will make more videos about each topic in the future, so subscribe. Number 7. A script. This step is hated by many comic artists, and most of the time many think that a script is not necessary. I personally and some other artists think that it's very useful to make the story more interesting, and the art will just make it even better. I know many people do not think it's necessary, but hey, if you can do whatever it takes to make your comic better, I am willing to do it, but maybe that's just me. In my case, I do not do it professionally, I just write and don't even worry about typos. And the good thing about having it written is that you can send it easily to beta readers, and if something is not right, if something is not interesting, you can change it very easily. If you do not have a script and then you realize that it wasn't interesting, you have to repeat all the artwork, which is something that I will have to do later. If you're more of a writer, you would need to write the story like you would for a play or a movie. Many people learn like this because it has the specifications for the artist, like if it's day or night, interior, exterior, etc. I will link resources in the box below in the description in case you want to learn more about this subject. Number 8. Name, storyboard, thumbnails. There are many names for this thing. And it's basically a rough draft of the comic. It doesn't matter if the drawings are ugly. It allows you to see the layout of the comic and also the different camera angles to make it more interesting, and you can see how your story will communicate to the reader. Thumbnails are made quickly, and it doesn't really matter if it's ugly as long as it conveys the message, however you say it. Number 9, and I am putting many steps here, which is basically each comic page. Of course, you do the draft, whether you are going traditional or you're going digital. Then you can do the inking. And then you can do the coloring, which is also an optional step, as many steps in this guide. But as you know, the coloring takes a long time but makes the comic look very good, so it's up to you. You can also do grayscale. For the coloring part, there are usually 2 steps, and there are actually 2 jobs about this in big comic companies, which is the first part of coloring is flatting, which is just putting the flats in the drawing, and then comes the colorist, which actually makes the effects for the art to look even better, like shadows and you know, effects. Be aware that color takes a long time, although it is usually a good way to call for attention from the readers. Like, they see a colored work, there are more chances that they pick up your comic. However, there are many masterpieces that haven't had to rely on color to be a success. And finally, step number 10, publish. Today we have lots of resources to publish comics, for example, online in webcomic hosting sites, so people on the internet can enjoy our story, for example, Webtoons, Tapastics, MacLeod, etc. We also have print-on-demand platforms in which you basically upload your comic, for example, with CreateSpace or Ingram Spark. If you or someone else buys your comic, then the comic is printed, and if nobody buys your comic, no comic is printed. So it doesn't waste unnecessary resources, and it's pretty good option. You also can go the editorial way, in which you go to a publishing house and they take care of publishing your comic. You can also search in Google for independent comic publishers and see if you are a good fit. I would add 2 extra tips. I know, what the hell. Many questions won't arise unless you start your comic, and trust me, it will be better because you will practice and learn a lot from doing it. Number 2 is promote. You have to take marketing into account, but yes, let's talk about other things in the future. If you subscribe to this red button over there, if you want to hear more about comics, the things that I do not learn for myself, I study on books and bring you the information. And yes, let's see you in my next video, and I hope this information was useful. You can also check my comic in the link in the description. Thank you for watching. Bye!